Today we're going to talk about keeping our values simple, having a more complicated reference, and to simplify the values you have to have simple shapes. So they kind of go hand in hand. Reduce the number of shapes, reduce the detail to just a handful of large shapes and values. Allows us to spend more time on color, pushing the color, keeping the color stronger, thinking more about temperature, and more varied color. But we can't do that unless the values and the shapes are kept simple. Today we're talking about simplifying values when we're working from photographs. And I've got several here from Greece. They're boat scenes, boat yards, and they tend to be very cluttered. A lot of stuff going on. The boats here are simplified. These light shadows of the white and the darks in here, fairly simplified. I want to pull some of that together a little bit, at least in the beginning, and then break it up some. But what's way too busy, way too much detail, too many values is back in here. And when I look at this, what I want to do is use the big dark shapes that are in the background to make the boat jump out. So I've got this tree here. I can move it over just a bit. Same thing with this tree over here. Maybe move it over here on this side. But use them to make the boat pop out. The darks again are fairly simple. The lights in the foreground in here are simple. This is what's complicated, and I want to pull that together. I want to pick a color in the background that's going to make the boat stand out more. The background is strictly to make the focal point stand out. So I got a kind of a bluish violet, and I got a kind of a reddish orange, which they're real close to complements. So if I overemphasize one or two values of that red orange against this blue violet, it's going to work a lot better. And then pull the trees in so they make the boat jump out even more. And I can incorporate maybe a little bit of the steps, but I need to get rid of the clutter and the value changes. Same thing down in here. There's way too much going on down there. So by eliminating this ramp and just a few things in there, I like to suggest clutter. There's some clutter in here of these boards that the boats are on, but I don't have to paint everything I see. I've got a basic value in the shadow. Then within the shadow I have two values, the darkest dark and then the lighter shadow of the boards. And I want to keep it like that and keep the shapes simpler than the photograph. But the background here will strictly be one or two values to make the boat stand out. And that's the goal in doing that. Now this is one of the photographs, also from Greece. And when you look at it, what I'm interested in, and identify what you're interested in first. And what I'm interested in is this area right in there. So everything else really doesn't matter. Certainly don't want the figures, maybe a suggestion of the door, a balcony maybe, but all this is way too busy. If this is my center of interest, I would prefer to get rid of this. There's some interest there, but you have to decide, what's important and what's not. I mean, I can look at this and say, I really like the boat. I like this boat. I like these green windows back in here. And the tile roof and the shrubbery, some flowers. That umbrella looks really good. Decide what's the main thing and then get rid of everything else. There might be a secondary interest, but it has to be pretty close by. To me, it would be the bike here leaning against the boat, or maybe these cans, but they're close enough to the focal point that they can kind of become a part. So I have two changes here I made. The first one is incorporating a bit of a realistic background. All my detail is going to be in the boats, the cans, maybe this boat as well. And I just want a solid value or two. I might have two values of dark in here if I get slightly darker dark and punch it in here. Now, I could get another value in here to suggest some form in the tree, but I got to be careful because it's more values. I'll be overemphasizing the values again pretty soon. Simplifying the foreground, breaking it up a little bit with these cast shadows here. And the background, just a variations of muted color. My strong color is going to be in the cans, the boat, the blue of the boat. I could interject a lot of other colors in there, get junk down here. Just variety of sizes of shape that are different, strong colors. But this would be my focal point. Everything else is just background. and somewhat abstract background, but it is, foliage. It is trees. And I got it all fairly gray compared to the boat. And nothing is as light as the lights on the boat, or will be as dark as the darks around the boat. And that's how I want to see it. I've got some shapes in here that suggest trees, but I'm really not concerned about them looking like trees. I mean, they will, but they don't have to be overly rendered. I can also, of course, before I even did anything, I would crop it first, because that's way too big. My focal point gets too small. Now my focal point is bigger, and I can really reduce the background. And, you think, well, what's the point of painting outside or taking reference if you're just going to make up more than half of it here? But that is the point, I think, is that I'm interested in this, and I'm not interested in anything else. So what I choose to do there, by simplifying, I think makes it work better. A lot of times you can use what's there and really simplify it. But sometimes it just think in terms of abstract shapes and block it in. Now, speaking of abstract shapes, that would be my other change here, is just a value in here that's dark. This is the darker value right there. It gets lighter as it goes out that way. They're all cool, and can get cooler as it goes away from the focal point. Suggestion of grass and dirt would be my only tilt to kind of realism outside of the boats, but I'd spend all my time on the boats. And I want, again, cooler colors that make these pop out. There is some warm in there, that reddish orange, but it's a very muted red-orange. When I say a cool background, it doesn't mean everything has to be blues. It can be cool reds, cool oranges, cool violets. And it'll be a lot cooler, again, than the white on the boats where the sun hits it. So again, nothing is as light as the white on the boats. So I knock the sand down, knock the grass down. It's a lot darker. So the boat really pops out. I much prefer to look at that framed and on a wall than that. Way too busy. I mean, it's realism because we can identify the stuff around it. That holds a little bit more interest to me as a painting rather than a photograph. One more here. Same thing with this one. The first thing I'd do is crop it. I'm interested in this boat here, so I would crop it in here like this. Now, I'm not interested in some of the stuff that I cropped still. This boat I would get rid of. A lot of this clutter, although I like the suggestion of the clutter. And I can put it in, but really simplify it. Get rid of a lot of the little darks and lights and just have shapes of subtle value changes or a dark accent once in a while. But even down in here, I want to pull it all together, at least at first. All these darks, simplify it. Same thing with the background as in the first picture. Way too much stuff. Now what I do like, along with the boat, is the blue cans, spots of red in here. So I might simplify all this clutter up here and just use shapes with stronger color. And I can get, a hint from, there's an orange thing up here. I can get some orange balls. I have those big orange floaty things. There's red down here. I can get some red up in here. And mute and cool down and darken most everything else. So here's the changes. A little busy up here now that I look at it. I pull that together a bit more. Instead of 2 or 3 different colors in that dark shadow, I would just put in one. And trying to suggest trees here, maybe varying the shape a little bit more. Right here. So this tree, and that's why it helps to look at things for a little while. I did it real quick and started the screen flow. So maybe different shapes on those trees. Maybe different color. I don't like that color as much. A bit more of a greenish. Again, not too light and not real strong. I can get a little bit stronger. And a bit darker towards the boat, darker green down in here. But again, that pops out. I've got the stronger color of some blue barrels, some reds, some strong color inside the boat. I do like the figures also. There's a couple of figures up in here that I would put in, or keep in. But simplifying everything else, because the boat's the center of interest. I would probably even crop this a bit more and get rid of some of that background. And that works a little bit more. Again, I can focus more on the stuff going on in here. So just simplifying those values. And you do this with the value sketch. I used to cut up a bunch of masonite, put a little gesso on them just for practice, and spend about 15-20 minutes just getting these big shapes kind of filled in. But that's a lot less clutter than this. This has way too much clutter, way too many value changes that makes color really difficult. The simpler the shapes, then the simpler the values, and then simpler the color. Now this one is already simplified. And once in a while you get photographs like that. There's 3 values in the tree. You got the darkest, lightest dark, and then the light. So, that's simplified. I'd pull these rocks together a bit more, a little bit more like that. Big, simple shapes. Even that's too busy for the boat. I would probably knock it way down. But everything is simplified. I got the 3 values here for the tree. Simple darks inside, a few simple lighter darks. So getting rid of all the value change and just leave a few simple changes of value in each big shape. Then the boats read better when we simplify. There's a couple of paintings here I want to look at. This is a Frederick Maulhop, not boats, but he does a good job of simplifying. Of course, when you have snow, it's already somewhat simplified. But massing together those big shapes really helps. So the tree here is just 2 values. 1, 2. Trunks are a simple value. Background, simple value. Snow is 2 values. The warm snow, white and orange, and then the yellow is probably a bit of orange. Everything's very simplified, shape-wise. That allows more broken color, which he doesn't have much of here, but nice simplified landscape. This one is also a Frederick Maulhaupt, Mulhaupt. Now there's a lot of broken brushwork in here, short choppy brushwork, but he's only got about 3 values in each tree. That one, this one, and these. Now he's got some broken color and short choppy vertical brushwork, which gives it a sense of detail, but there's really not many value changes. And when you can keep everything simple, again, like down in here, very simple greens and yellow oranges, yellow greens and yellow oranges. If I were to desaturate it, all that detail falls away some because a lot of this is color change. What gives it a sense of detail is just a subtle change of color, not a change of value. When we add the color again, it looks more detailed, but it's more just value change. And this way he can focus on the light or the color a lot more than the values because he's kept the values real simple. And you do that in the beginning. You don't do it halfway through when you have a lot of stuff in there. The thumbnail, the simple drawing on the canvas, and then the big block in when you block in the colors. Keep things big and simple. A couple of paintings here from Emile Groupé, and he painted outside. That was one reason to keep things simple, but very little value changes. When we look at this black and white, you can see there's not a lot of big value changes. The big shapes have subtle changes to them, but the variation comes from color changes in these areas. And especially in here is a lot of color in there. There's value change too, but not much. So keep those value changes down to a minimum. Same way here. Again, there's a lot of color in here, but he starts with these big simple values like in the background. Then you can break it up. But of course, wasn't there when he painted it, but he's had to eliminate a lot of stuff because there's no unnecessary clutter. Everything that's added in there adds to the painting. So think about, in the beginning, that simplified value sketch where you find the shadow pattern, and don't go much beyond that when you draw on the canvas. The more you draw on the canvas, the more smaller shapes and details and values you're going to have, and color becomes a lot harder. First of all, the thumbnail. Move this in just a bit. And I've got the white of the paper represents the light and the halftone. Halftone and light are on the same time, on the same side. I'm not talking about a halftone dark. When I say halftone, I mean it's part of the light. So the rocks, the white parts of the boat, they're light. Sand might be a bit more of a halftone. But all the light area is the white paper. And then there's a value for the water, which isn't necessarily, I'm kind of drifting away, isn't necessarily shadow, but it is a dark. But my 2 main darks, and again, when we simplify values, that means getting rid of detail. 2 main darks are the real dark darks underneath the boats, and some on the dock here, and then the darks of the trees. There's a lot of little darks and lights up in here, a lot of little darks and lights in the boats that we're going to ignore because we're after that big pattern that works. And the more I can keep that bigger, simpler pattern of values, the better it's going to work.